Welcome, everybody. My name is Mish Boutte. I'm the Digital Literacy Librarian at the University of Ottawa Library. And today's session is going to be an introduction to Zotero, citation management software. Zotero is one of several citation managers that are available. So why am I doing a session on Zotero rather than EndNote or Mendeley? Well, if I teach you one citation manager, the main features work in the other citation managers as well. But there's a few reasons why I prefer Zotero. One, it's the only of the citation managers that it has a bilingual interface, in that it has a French interface as well as an English interface. It's the one open source tool, so you never have to worry about losing access to Zotero should the company that makes the program go offline. Zotero will continue to be available. Also, I find that Zotero's capture tool, the web connector, works reliably well, whereas the ones for Mendeley and EndNote I don't always have as much success with. And just generally, since the tool is free to start with, and you have up to 300 megs of storage space for free if you create an account, there's no cost associated. Whereas with EndNote, for example, you need to pay about $150 if you're a student, close to $400 if you're not a student. All right, so the first step is to download and install Zotero. And so to use Zotero, it works with Windows, Mac, or Linux. So if you're using a Chromebook, unfortunately, you won't be able to install and use Zotero. However, you can sign into Zotero.org and access a limited number of features that way, or you could use Zotero Bib to create one-off bibliographies, if you like. It's not a fully featured citation management tool. It's just a quick, free online bibliography generator. All right, but if you want to install Zotero, you go to zotero.org, and there's two components to the installation. First is the software that you download and install. And so here it is on the right. Currently, Zotero is at version 5. So you would download it. Once the download file has downloaded, you would run the exe file, and it would start to extract and install. And by the time I finish this explanation here, the software will pretty much have been installed. I'm not going to reinstall it on my system because I've already got it. Then the second part, there's a second component to the installation, and that second component is to install Zotero's browser connector. So the Zotero browser connector will create a button in your browser, and this button will let you pull the information from any journal article or list of search results or individual web pages, pull the metadata from those things into Zotero, so you can save it as a reference to cite in your work. So the Zotero browser connector works with Firefox, it works with Chrome, it works with Microsoft Edge. If you have a Mac and you use Safari, when you click install, there's going to be a note that pops up because Zotero still doesn't work terribly well with Safari because of the way the plugins work. Zotero is working on fixing that, but if you use a Mac, I really recommend that you use a browser other than Safari when you're using Zotero. You can use Safari for other things, but when you use Zotero, I recommend Firefox, Chrome. You don't have Edge because that's a Microsoft tool, I suppose. All right, so you download this component, you download this component, and once you've downloaded it, you should see it starts off as a Z button in your browser. But you'll soon notice that that browser button changes depending on what you see on your screen. So sometimes it looks like a page with a little gray box at the bottom. Sometimes it looks like a page with lines on it. Sometimes it looks like a yellow folder. And I'll talk about what that means as we go. So once you've installed Zotero, You can load it up from your computer, and when you load up Zotero, it's going to look like this. And citation managers function in a very similar way, all of them, whether it's EndNote, Mendeley, or Zotero, in that it's presented in sort of a three-paned window. On the left, you have all of your folders, all of your collections, and you use these collections to organize your Zotero library. In the middle, when you first install it, it's going to be empty, but eventually you're going to populate the middle with all of the different journal articles, book chapters, conference proceedings, books, videos, web pages that you want to save. So the middle pane is for the list of different citations you have, depending on what folder you've selected. And then on the right, if you select one of the items from the middle pane, on the right is the metadata for that one item. So the information that you use to cite that one item. So I've selected this top article, and the metadata says it's a journal article. Here's the title, here are the authors, here's the abstract, the date, the pages, the volume, and the issue. I didn't type any of this information into Zotero myself. Zotero pulled it automatically from online to save me a bit of time when I cite. That being said, when you pull this information from online, it's not always going to be 100% accurate and ready to go. You're going to need to check the citation information against the original article just to make sure that everything's there. Sometimes an author might be missing. Sometimes the year of publication is off by a year, because sometimes you'll get a preprint of an article and then the actual publication of the article, and there's a bit of a difference there. So it's always helpful to check this metadata when you pull items into Zotero. And if you ever need to correct any metadata, all you need to do is click on a field and just type in the correction. I'm not going to change the author's name because as far as I know, it is correct. But as soon as you unselect it, the change is automatically saved. All right. So, there's one other step that I skipped with the installation, and I'll show that in just a moment because soon we're going to set Zotero preferences before we continue. But I do see in the chat that there's a comment that says, I've been importing references manually, and each reference makes a different folder in the left pane. I'll ask more about that shortly because I'm not quite sure why each reference makes a different folder. Oh, do you mean when you import refs manually, are you importing them as an RIS file? Or how are you importing those references manually? Okay, yes. This is maybe getting just a little bit further into the session. When you pull references into Zotero, you can either press that Zotero button and it'll pull stuff straight into Zotero, or there's another way you can do it. You can save a little file called an RIS file, which is a file that citation management software can read. And you can import that RIS file. When you import an RIS file into Zotero, Zotero will create a folder just for that RIS file. So I'll show what's meant by that, or NBIB files. Yeah, there's a few different type of file types. RIS is sort of a universal file type for citation managers in general. All right, so the one thing that I forgot to mention, if we go back to the installation page, is that at this point, you have the option to register with Zotero. So it's not mandatory to register with Zotero. However, if you're using Mendeley, for example, Mendeley requires you to register an account to use the tool. With Zotero, it's optional, but there's a few benefits to registering. If you register with a Zotero account, that enables you to make use of the 300 megs of online storage space to sync up your Zotero library and to save it on the cloud so that there's one backup. Even if you do that, even if you create a Zotero account and save to the cloud, I strongly recommend that you also occasionally do a manual backup of your Zotero library and save it to an external hard drive or something other than the computer that you use, just so you have more than one backup in case anything should ever happen to your computer, for example. So you go to register, and the only information that's required is a username, an email address, and a password. No date of birth, no other personally identifying information. You confirm that you're not a robot, and you register. And then once you've registered, you have that 300 megs of storage, and you also are able to create and join group libraries where you and other research collaborators can work together, adding references to a group library and citing items from that group library. All right. That's important to know, because now what we're going to do is set a few Zotero preferences. So before you start using Zotero, there's a few preferences that I suggest you change. So you would go to Edit Preferences, and if you're, I'll just go to this so it's a bit less busy on the screen. Edit Preferences, and if you're using a Mac, it would be Zotero Preferences. So there's a question in the chat saying, do I have to sign back in if I already downloaded Zotero? So if you've downloaded Zotero, you don't have to sign in online. But if you have not created an account, that's where you would create an account. You would create an account online. And I'll show you where you sign into your account on the downloaded version of Zotero in just a moment. So here's the Zotero Preferences box. And from the General tab, the first change that I suggest you make is under Miscellaneous. There's an item that says Automatically Tag Items with Keywords and Subject Headings. I really suggest that you uncheck that box, take the checks out of that box. That way, when you pull items from a database like PubMed or Scopus or Web of Science, Zotero will not use the subject terms from that database to create new tags in your tags section. Because if you leave it checked, it'll create hundreds of tags, and it'll have multiple terms for the exact same thing, and it'll flood your tags with useless tags, and it'll kind of ruin that experience. So if you want to make use of tags, uncheck this box. The second thing, if you click on the Sync tab, this is where you would log into your account. So you click Sync, and if you're not already logged in, there's a place to add your Zotero username and your Zotero password. So here is where you create your username and password. And then here in Zotero is where you write in your username and password to connect your installed version of Zotero to the cloud so that you can sync and save and use group libraries. Another thing that I want to mention, I've been getting ahead of myself because of the late start, is that everything that I'm telling you today, I do have a couple of handouts that I will place in the chat that'll give the same instructions that I'm giving you now. So don't worry if you miss anything. I will give you some handouts with those step-by-step instructions, so you'll be good to go with the installation and the setting preferences and the using Zotero. All right, so you signed in. Two other details that's helpful for you to know about. So if you click on the Cite tab, and if you click on word processors, so Zotero integrates with Microsoft Word, LibreOffice, and it even integrates with Google Docs. So when you install Zotero in the browser connector, it automatically tries to add the plugin to Word and to Google Docs. And the way you would check that is you would open Microsoft Word, and you would check along the top to see, is there a Zotero tab in Microsoft Word? If there is, great, you're ready to go. If there isn't, then under the Cite tab, word processors is where you would click to try installing or reinstalling the Word plugin. I hope I didn't, no, just making sure I didn't uninstall it on myself there. All right. Sometimes when people install Zotero, they'll find that the Zotero plugin didn't get installed. And usually that's because when you install Zotero, you should make sure all your Microsoft tools are closed, whether that's OneNote, Word, Outlook, any other Microsoft tool. Make sure it's closed when you install Zotero, and that'll increase the likelihood of a successful plugin add. in Word. All right, one more setting, and then we'll continue. Under the Advanced tab, under the Open URL section, the resolver has a URL that says WorldCat, and the WorldCat URL is just this online library catalog, confederation of catalogs that'll give you metadata from like free library catalog sources. But if you want help trying to find full text PDF articles from the University of Ottawa Library, you want to use the University of Ottawa's link resolver. And it's a very long URL, so I'll just copy it and paste it in my resolver box. And I will also paste it into the chat. So don't click on that link, but if you copy that link and paste it into Zotero and then select OK, now you'll be able to use Zotero to go through the University of Ottawa Library's catalog Omni to try to find full text PDFs for items that you have in your Zotero library that don't have a PDF attachment. All right, so I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment and just come in to check. Okay, great. There's a question in the chat. Where do we paste the link? So again, when you're in Preferences, in the Advanced tab, so it's the last tab under Preferences, and then under Open URL, you paste it into the resolver field. The resolver field, that's correct. And there's a question in the chat. Does the connector need to be installed for this link to work? No, it doesn't need to be installed for this link to work. I'll show you how this resolver URL works with Zotero. Great. Any other questions? You can plug in any other questions in the chat and I'll read them out and answer them. All right. It looks like we're good to go. So far we have downloaded, installed Zotero and the browser connector, and we've set our preferences. So now we are ready to start using Zotero. So I'll go back to sharing my screen. So actually, I've already got a good selection of folders here. Zotero calls them collections, but you will need to start creating your own collections. And so what you do is from my library, if you just right click on my library, you can select new collection. The other option is there's a button here with a folder with a green plus. It's very small, but it says new collection. So you can click on that. You put a name for your collection. Then you press OK, and Zotero will create that new collection for you. Now, there's maybe a specific reason that Zotero calls it a collection rather than a folder, because it operates a little bit differently from folders on your hard drive. Because usually with a folder, if you place a file in a folder, that's where the file lives. But collections work a bit differently in that you can take one of your articles in Zotero and you can place it in multiple collections if it's related to multiple collections in your Zotero folder collection structure. So for example, say you have a collection for qualitative articles and you have another collection for your dissertation. And there's an article that's both a qualitative study and relative to your dissertation. You can drag it and drop it into both of those collections, and it'll be present in both of those collections. So at this point, it's important to make a distinction between taking one article and putting it in multiple collections, which is fine. Distinguishing that from having multiple copies of the same article in your Zotero database. So if I click on my library, this is everything that I have in my Zotero database, every single article and book chapter, etc. Everything should have only one entry. If I see that an article is entered twice or 3 times or 4 times, those are duplicates, and I want to get rid of them. If you have duplicates of the same article, Zotero will think that those are 2 or 3 different articles when you start using Microsoft Word, and you might get into strange situations where your bibliography has the same article twice, or if you use a numbered referencing system, it'll give the same article different numbers. So that's why. So you can always sort all of your items by title. You can sort all of your items by author. It's listed as creator. And you can run down the list to see the items that I have by the same author. Are they different items or are they the same? And you always want to make sure that your Zotero library is clear of duplicates, so you don't get into problems there. Zotero also has this item on the left pane called duplicate items. If you select it, Zotero will try to identify duplicates in your library for you so that you can select them and merge them into a single item and resolve any duplicate errors. All right. So I created this workshop collection to use for this session today. So I'll select that workshop folder. So there's a few ways to get items into Zotero. One way, if I go to the library site and I do a search for something, I'll search for any information that the library has on Zotero. I have a list of results here. Omni shows me the first 10 results. And what happens is from my list of results here, the Zotero button has turned into a folder indicating that it sees multiple items on the page that it can import into Zotero. So if I click on that browser button, a pop-up box appears listing the 10 items that it sees on the screen. I can select the ones that I think are relevant for my research. I'll select these 3 items here, and I'll click OK. Zotero will pull the metadata from those 3 items into my Zotero database. And when it's able to, it will pull the full text PDF into Zotero as well, so that I'll be able to open the PDF in Zotero and read the full text. Now, if you're using Zotero from home, Zotero will go through Unpaywall, which is a database of openly accessible articles, full text PDF articles. So it'll pull freely accessible PDFs into Zotero when they're available. If you want to get stuff from the library, then if you want Zotero to automatically pull stuff from the library, then you'll need to do that on campus. If you're doing it from home, it's not going to pull things from the library. It's only going to pull open access stuff. However, the link resolver can still help you out, and I'll show you how that works shortly. All right, so I'll go back to Zotero, and I'll see that I've saved these 2 items, which are 2 versions of the same book. Okay, and then this item here, which is an article, and if I click on the little caret at the left side beside the page, I see that I have the PDF attachment that I can double click. And it's just taking a moment to open. I can double click and read here. All right. So I'm just going to see, because these are 2 versions of the same book. If I click to duplicate items, oh, it doesn't see it as a duplicate, and because it's 2 versions of the same book. All right. So that's one way. You can pull items from a database, whether it's a library catalog or Google Scholar. So I'll show you Google Scholar, for example. Type in scholar.google.com. Again, I run a search for Zotero. And again, the Zotero button turns into a folder. So I can click on the Zotero button. And again, I'll have items that I can select. And I'll take 3 more and bring them over to my Zotero library. And in this case here, it looks like it's trying to get the full text of all 3 items. We'll see if it succeeds or if it fails. I see in the chat a comment that says, "This is amazing." And this is part of the magic that is Zotero, is automatically pulling full text PDF through the browser connector. And in the comment in the chat, I had no idea about the connector. Well, I'm glad that I could introduce you to that. And this can really help you get those full text articles as you work. You can also do it from an individual articles page. So here I'll click through to Zotero a product review. And so here is the actual journal page. And the Zotero button has now turned into a page with lines on it, indicating that it sees one item on the page. So I'll just save that item, and it'll bring that over to my Zotero library as well. The reason why I'm showing for an individual journal page, as opposed to like a database like Omni, or a library catalog like Omni or Google Scholar, or even a database like Scopus, is the closer you get to the original journal source, the better quality metadata you're going to have. So this page right here is probably going to have the best quality metadata for this article here. Google Scholar and Omni are going to have less, there's going to be more errors and more problems with the metadata you pull there. And then in between those are the databases like PubMed and Scopus. They'll be a little bit better than Omni and Google Scholar, but not quite as accurate as getting it directly from the journal article source. Just something to keep in mind. All right, so I'll go back over to Zotero, and I see that I now have 7 items. And this time I actually do have a duplicate. This is the same item twice. So I'll go over to my duplicate items, and here Zotero's flagged it. So I'll select the duplicates, and what I can do is I can merge the 2 items together. An additional detail, which is starting to get into the fine details about Zotero, is before I merge, I can see the metadata of both of those items to compare. This is the metadata from the top entry, and this is the metadata from the bottom. And I see that the metadata on the bottom has just a little more detail. It has the DOI, it has an abstract. So I'm going to leave the selection on the bottom item, and now I'm going to select merge the 2 items. So those duplicates are merged into a single item, and it's going to keep that better quality metadata from that bottom one that I've selected. All right, so that's the process of merging duplicates into a single item. I'll go back to my workshops folder, and now I'm down to 6 items instead of 7 because the duplicate has been merged. All right, just a couple more ways of getting items to Zotero. If you already have, so if you haven't used a citation manager yet, chances are you already have a set of PDF articles on your computer. And what you can do with Zotero is just, so I have this PDF right here. You can just drag and drop your PDFs into Zotero, and Zotero will try to identify those PDFs. And when it can identify those PDFs, it will create the metadata for it. So now this article by Huffman has metadata created, and it's a journal article, the title, the author, and everything. So I can start citing it through Zotero. Now this process works really well for English language journal articles. And if the articles aren't in English, it works less well. And if the document is not a journal article, it works less well. So it can work with book chapters, as long as Zotero can successfully read the metadata. If you're using like government documents and online reports and white papers and PDFs that aren't journal articles, Zotero will have a much more difficult time automatically creating the metadata. However, if ever Zotero can't recognize an item, then you can manually create an entry for it. So if ever in your Zotero library here in the middle, if ever you see, let's see if this works. Okay, there you go. If ever you see a PDF icon, a PDF just hanging out in Zotero, that means that PDF doesn't have an entry, and it can't be cited and it can't be used in Zotero. You have to create an item manually and then add the PDF to that. So what I would do here is I would create new item, I would create journal article, and then I would start filling in the metadata. I'd give it a title, I'd give it an author, say that I wrote this. I didn't. I'm not trying to take claim. I'm just for the sake of this thing. And then I'd choose the date of publication, 2025. It was written in the future. Once I've filled out all the necessary fields, I can take the PDF and I can drag and drop it into that entry. And now that full text PDF does have an entry in Zotero. So you can also do that for print books that you have. If you have a print book in front of you and you want to add that print book to Zotero, you can manually create an entry. All right, so what I'll do is I'm just going, okay, so here we go. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Here, I click on this little expansion item, and I see that there's no actual full text PDF here for this 2011 article, Zotero, a bibliographic assistant to researcher. So this is where adding that link resolver to the preferences comes in handy. Say that I want to try to find the full text here. What I can do is if I have this item selected, I can go up here into the bar. There's a little green arrow with a drop down. I click on the drop down and I'll click on library lookup. So when you click library lookup, it uses the resolver URL that you added in preferences. So this is where it's going to look through the University of Ottawa Libraries holdings to see if it can find full text for that item. So it's going through Omni. It's going to take a minute to think. And sometimes, if it doesn't find something successfully, you just get this blank screen here. Let's try it one more time. Okay, so when that happens, that suggests to me that that full text isn't available. Now it tried to open. Okay, so it used the DOI here instead of the full text. So I'll see if I can get the full text this way. All right. So sometimes this process works smoothly and easily, and sometimes this process takes a few steps. So here I can see the full text PDF for that item. So I'll try to save it. And we'll see this time it pulled the full text PDF. I go back to Zotero. All right, and so this time I have the item twice. Here's the one with the full text. This was the first entry without the full text. So I can right click this and move the item to the trash to get rid of my duplicate. And now I have that item with full text. Okay, I'm gonna try one more. I'll see if I have one more that doesn't have full text. All these have the full text. All right, let's go to my library to see if I have something without full text. Here we go. I have a 2018 article here. Can cooperative video games encourage social and motivational inclusion of at-risk students? I see that there's no expansion for the full text PDF. So I'll select this. I'll select that green arrow and click library lookup. Again, it's going to look through the University of Ottawa's holdings. And am I out of luck again today? All right, so it looks like we don't have that one either. However, when we do have it, there'll be a result here, and there'll be a list of databases where the full text is available. And I would click on one of those databases, and it would go to a page with the PDF, and then I could click the browser button to save the PDF full text. Today, for the live demonstration, I haven't been as so lucky. All right. So saving a single result or reference, saving from a list of results, saving PDFs. So just to go back to what was mentioned in the chat about an RIS file, I'll show you that very briefly. So here, I'll just go to one of our databases. So here I am at the library's website, biblio.uottawa.ca. I could go to find databases A to Z. And I'm going to go to Academic Search Complete. Academic Search Complete is a multidisciplinary database, and it has a lot of full text. So it works really well with Zotero. So here, I'm going to type in Zotero and search Academic Search Complete. I've got 89 results, 50 of which show on this screen. So with this, there's two ways I can go. Well, there's a couple ways I can go about pulling this into Zotero. I can do what I did before, where I click the browser button. And again, I can select all of those 50 items that I want to save over to Zotero. The other thing that I can do, though, is now every database does this a little bit differently. So I want to add these 50 results to a folder. Then I can go to a folder. And what I can do is I can select all 50 items and click export. And so it's giving me a lot of options here, but one of the options is to export in the RIS format. So this is before browser connectors got really well integrated with citation managers. This was the way to save things to citation managers, was with these RIS files. So I'll see if I can save it as an RIS file. There we go. An RIS file has been saved to my computer. It's called delivery.ris. Now what I would do is I would go over to Zotero. I would go to File, Import. And I'm saying I'm importing a file. And I would find that delivery RIS file and click Open. And the Zotero is going to import those 50 items that were saved in that RIS file into Zotero. So I've got those 50 items added here. The downside to doing this is that you don't get any full text PDF this way. You only get the metadata and you don't get full text. But what you can do is once you've done this, you've imported this RIS, you can select a handful of these. You can right click on them and you can select Find Available PDFs. And Zotero will try to find which full text PDFs are available through unpaywall, through open access. Now here, it doesn't seem to be working too successfully. Now it's gonna be very hit and miss with depending on the database you pull from and depending on the information that you've got. All right, so I've talked about installing Zotero. I've talked about adding items to Zotero. I'll remind you again that once you've pulled things into Zotero, if you notice any problems with the metadata, you select the item and you correct the metadata here in these fields. Because the next thing that I'm going to do is talk about using Microsoft Word to create a bibliography. So for those of you who have already used a citation manager with Word, you'll notice when you add citations into Word, you might see mistakes and you might be tempted to correct those mistakes in Word. And my advice is don't correct in Word, correct in Zotero. Because if you correct in Zotero, then from that point onwards, whenever you cite that information, it'll cite the correct information rather than the incorrect information. Whereas if you try to do the corrections in Word, then anytime you refresh your bibliography or anytime you start a new document and cite the same article, you'll get those mistakes back. And it might prove to be a bit frustrating. All right, so when I want to use Zotero with Word, I keep Zotero open, running in the background, and I open up Word. So here's my Word document. I've got a report, and I need to add some citations because I've quoted information, I've paraphrased information, and I've summarized information. So I need to make sure that I add quotes to avoid plagiarism, for example. And then I also need to add a bibliography at the end. So I'm going to go to the first item, and this is where I'm going to add my first item from Zotero. So I go to my Zotero tab, and I'm going to click the Add Edit Citation button. When you click Add Edit Citation, the first time you do this, oh, just a moment, sorry. There we go. The first time you do this, a box will pop up asking you what citation style you want to use. And you can select any of the default styles. There's APA, there's MLA, there's Vancouver, there's Chicago, there's a few other default styles. And you can add tens of thousands of other styles as well. Lots of journals have their own specific styles, which are usually just adaptations of the main styles. So once you've selected one and selected OK, don't worry, because you can always go back and change it. But choose a citation style for now. I've got APA style selected, I believe, but if I need to change it, I will. So I've clicked Add Edit Citation, and this red Zotero box has popped up. So what I can do now is I can start typing in either the author or the title of the item I want to cite. So say I'm writing a report about Facebook. So I want an article that has Facebook in the title from my Zotero database. And so I start typing in Facebook, and a list of results starts populating. And so I'll start off with this article by Cross. I'll click on that. And Zotero starts to format the in-text citation according to APA style, which is what I have selected. But this is a direct quote, so I need to add a page number. So what I can do before I press enter is that I click on this bubble with Cross et al. And a little drop down appears, and there's a field that I can add the page number. I'll say page 8. I'll press enter, and then I'll press enter once more. And now Zotero adds the in-text citation formatted in APA style with the page number. All right, I'll add another one. This time I've paraphrased information from another Facebook article. So there's a question in the chat that says, what if you want to change citation style? Very good question. I will show you that in about a minute, 2 minutes. All right, well-phrased paraphrase. I go to Add Edit Citation. And again, I start typing in Facebook. And this time, instead of Cross, I'll use this article by Shakya and Christakis. There's no page number necessary. I press enter. Presented there. And then finally, I have a general statement about a field of research. So I want to add quotes from a few authors, not just one. So one more time, I click Add Edit Citation. I start typing in Facebook one more time. This time, I want this article by Tromholt. Now I start typing in the next item before I press enter. So Facebook again. This article by Dang Nguyen. And one more time, I want to use the article by Cross et al. Once more. So I'll select Cross et al. Again. I select that. And now I can press enter. And Zotero will add those 3 items. And according to APA style, it'll organize them with the alphabetical order of the first author's last name. So Zotero is smart enough to even like organize the order of citations that go into your inline citations. Now, I would do this for the entirety of my report. And when I've gotten to the end of my report, it's time to do the bibliography. So if you haven't been using citation management software, presumably you've been manually creating your bibliographies, or maybe you use an online bibliography generator like Zotero Bib. But if you do it manually, think about how long it takes you. Does it take you 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour? And while you're thinking about how long it takes you to create your bibliography, I'm going to click this Add Edit Bibliography button, and I'm going to be done my bibliography. It's already created. It is literally the click of a button with Zotero to create a bibliography. Now, again, you still need to know your citation style to see if there's any information missing. And you also need to be able to check the citation to see if there are any mistakes in the bibliography. And again, if you notice mistakes, go over to Zotero and correct the mistakes here. Do not correct them in Word because you might lose them once you refresh. So there was the question in the chat, what do you want to do if you change citation style? So say I want to change from APA style, which is an author date style, and I want to switch it to Vancouver style, which is a numbered system. So here I would select Document Preferences, and a pop-up would appear with the citation styles that are currently available. So I would scroll down. Here I'll select Vancouver. I select OK. And just like that, Zotero has switched from APA style to Vancouver style. This time it's a numbered system, so sequential numbering of articles as they appear in the report. And then the references are organized in the same way, sequential, in the order that they appear in my part. So I see in the chat, it says, sorry, my computer lagged while you were speaking. Could you please repeat the first part? I can. I'll do the steps backwards. I'll switch back from Vancouver to APA style. So from here, I select document preferences. I've currently got Vancouver selected, so I'll just go back up. I'll go to APA 7th edition and I'll select OK. And Zotero will reconfigure the bibliography from numbered system back to author date system, and will redo my bibliography alphabetically by author name rather than numerically by the order it appears in the report. Those are the main features that I wanted to share with you about Zotero. So how to install it, how to organize items in your Zotero library, and how to use Zotero to cite items in Word. And the sequence is the same if you're using Google Docs. So and looks, even though we started late, we've still got 5 minutes to spare. So that's the end of my presentation today. But I'm welcome any questions that you might have, either about anything I've presented or other questions you have about Zotero. So do you have any questions? Oh, I said I would drop those documents in the chat. So here, there's 2 files that I'm going to drop into the chat for you. One is the installation guide, and the other is the Zotero guide. So those 2 documents in the chat will cover all the content that I've presented today. I see in the chat there's a question, could you show us how to change citation styles on Google Docs? So with Google Docs, similar to with Word, you should see a Zotero tab. Now, the first time you click on the Zotero tab, Google will ask permission, will ask to give Zotero permission to share data so that it can work. But here, so let's just add edit citation. So here's where it's asking me to connect to my Google account. I can choose a citation style here. Okay, there. So I get that same red pop-up box here. So I'll start typing in Cross's name, Cross et al. I'll add a citation there. Press enter. Okay, and I'll just do one more for now. So Zotero, add citation. There we go. There we go. So I've got those 2 items, and with Zotero, I go to add edit bibliography, and it's adding the bibliography here. There we go. And so you had asked about changing citation style. So let's see if the process is the same. I go to Zotero, I go to document preferences, and then here, if I switch to Vancouver, will it work? I select Vancouver and I select OK. And it's updating, and yes, so the process is identical between Google Docs and Microsoft Word. So thank you for that question. Are there any other questions? Can I explain tags? I can. I'll just say, just before I show tags, I see that it's 11:58. So if anybody has to leave because we're supposed to be done by noon, that's totally fine with me. I hope the session was useful to you, and I thank you for showing up. If you are able to stay a minute or 2 past the hour, I'll continue answering questions and I'll show tags. So let's go straight to that. So one more time, go back to sharing screen. Okay, so I go to Zotero. And for any item that I select in Zotero, there's the metadata here, but then there's a couple of other tabs up here. There's notes, and notes are just like little post-its that you can create for yourself if you want to keep track of important information from that article. And then there's an item tag. And a tag is simply another way. So you can use collections as a way to organize your library. But tags is another way that you can use to organize items in Zotero. So for example, by default, Zotero doesn't have a way to indicate what things that you've read and what things you haven't read. So you can create an unread tag. So anytime you haven't read an article, you can give it an unread tag. And it'll add that tag. It is case sensitive though. So here I have unread with a capital U, and here I have unread with a small u, and it treats it as two different tags. So let me try that again. If I do it with a capital U, there. I'll do one more. So here I'm going to add a tag and say I'm going to have a tag for a class, ISI 6371, and I'll add that tag there. Then what I can do is whenever I want to filter my results by tags, I can click on the unread tag to see, well, what are my unread articles? Or I can say, well, what are my articles tagged with ISI 6371? So it's just another means for you to organize things in addition to having folders. Thank you once again, everybody, for showing up. I'll stick around a little bit longer for any final questions, but I hope you all have a great day.